and like everything just went black. Mind you, I'm behind the wheel of my car, right?
Mm.
So I passed out, right?
What?
And I go through one of the busiest intersections in my area.
You are watching the Heavy Metal Therapist podcast, where we ask not what you're doing, but how you're doing. This evening, I'm joined by my good friend Mark. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks. How's everything going over across the pond?
It's a bit bizarre. We've got quite a bit of a heat wave going on, and there's been a lack of rain recently. So
Man, I live in Florida.
enjoying
Like, come on.
it. Yeah,
You
I don't
know,
think you guys don't believe in rain, do you? There?
no, we like so it's weird. We like Florida's kind of weird like that because we have this weird weather phenomenon that I'm not sure exists in many other or if any other parts of the world where you can almost like set your watches to the rain. So during the summer, like every day by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you get this torrential downpour, and it lasts maybe 10, 15 minutes tops, and then it
Wow,
opens up and it's stupid hot and steamy outside.
that's wild,
Yeah, it's silly.
huh? I wish we had that. When it just rains, we're just like, is it gonna stop? Is it? Yeah, it just goes through it. But it's been
Yeah, right.
weirdly dry, and it's quite. We're at about. We've been hitting about 75 last few days. So
Yeah, I was
yeah.
95 all week, bro.
Oh, there you go. There you go. One up. So so Mark, we met while you were on tour with Il Nino doing their teching. Um,
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about. I know you've recently taken a step back from teching quite as often, but up
right.
until recently, what was it? What was it you kind of did when you went out on the road with people?
Sure. So El Nino was funny because the first time that I met you, I think that was our first because we did that summer we did two trips to Europe, and I want to say that was our first. Yeah, that was our first. So basically, your level of responsibility kind of and when I say responsibility, I mean like the amount of jobs you have on a tour.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of it's like the bigger the budget the band has, the less amount of jobs you have on the tour.
right.
Uh, so on that one, I was teching for both guitar players and the bass player. But like a typical day is like you get in and you unload if you're on a bus and trailer tour, you unload the trailer. You set you put all the cases where they're supposed to go. You set up all that. For me being the guitar slash bass tech on that one, I set up all the guitars and bass amps, and then you connect everything. You make sure everything works. You set up your workstation. Make sure guitars are tuned. If strings got to be changed, you change them. Um, and then after that, you'll at least for me, like I might go check on and see if any of the other techs need help, or
Yeah,
um, and then after that you got sound check, and then between sound check and the show, especially if you're headlining, you've got a good 4 to 5 hours to kill in between
yeah,
sound check and the show.
yeah. It didn't feel like when we met, it didn't feel like you had that much time, because I remember I had to like you had to rush back, so I ended up getting your food, like picking up your food for you, because you were in.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah.
that
So
was a wild, yeah. That seemed
I
like a
I
less,
remember
yeah,
I remember that very vividly actually because
yeah,
that was so I was out there with Il Nino, and they were the first band that I really worked with. And it's kind of a wild story how I got there, and I can explain that later if you'd like. But basically, I had no clue. Like I knew how to tune guitars.
yeah,
I'd done up until that point. I'd done maybe 4 or 5 shows with them. I knew how to tune guitars. I knew how to plug in amps. I know how to do guitar maintenance. Fix level frets, stuff like that. Um, but I was thrown into it, and
yeah,
it was definitely a what's the phrase I'm looking for? Trial by fire. It's definitely trial by fire.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm thinking we're good, and then all of a sudden, my phone's blowing up. Hey, get back to the venue now. We got this, and I'm like, oh my god, all right, let me get back.
Yeah.
So it was pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for getting my food that day.
Oh yeah, no, you're welcome.
the good old Tesco sandwiches.
Oh yeah, you gotta. For those in Britain, you gotta have a Tesco's meal deal. For those in America, just yeah. You when you come here, Tesco's meal deal will save your life. But
facts.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier, and like that must have been quite an interesting experience for you, because while when you're on the road, you have the normal stresses and the normal like things that everyone else goes through. It kind of maybe feels like you're almost on the outside because the band know each other, they're all connected. And
I mean, so on those specific 2 runs, around the time when I first met you, it wasn't as bad because like I wasn't out for more than 2 weeks at that point.
Yeah.
Like the first run that I did with them, it was just like 3 or 4 shows in the States here. I was home within 5 days.
Okay. Yeah.
The second run I did, which is when I met you, that was like 2 weeks in Europe or something like that, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks. And I'm fortunate because my kids at that time, I think they just graduated high school. And then, there's that saying, behind every man is a strong woman or whatever. And,
right.
I'm very fortunate. My wife was here holding it down. She has, cause the world was just opening back up from the pandemic at that time. And my wife had a job that she, was working from home. She still has a job that she's working from home. And she gave me her blessing. She's like, you know what, go do it. And, I didn't have to worry about anything, the only thing that I did worry, of course, because, I also, with that, like I'm fortunate to still have my mother. My father passed on about 13 years ago, but, my mother is pushing, my mother's 80 now. So of course, I'm always worried about her. Thankfully, she's in great health and great physical and mental health.
Yeah.
But, like at that time, I think the biggest stress that we had, aside from, financial, was the fact that my wife was home and then having to take care of 3 senior dogs at that time,
wow.
So it's like she's working, and we have like all of our dogs were old. So she's having to clean up after them and feed them. And, this one's sick. This one had an accident at the house.
Oh my gosh.
But on top of that, she's got to make sure she gets her work done. And, the kids helped out too, but, they're also, in their 20s, they got jobs, at that time, they were fresh out of high school. So it was just work and then, home pretty much for them. But, as I got on, and got on with other bands, I'm out for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, that's when it starts to set in,
Yeah.
So for me, I am, I'm gonna open up to you a little bit about certain things, but I'm definitely like neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And, it's something that I discovered pretty late in life. So I, didn't have a lot of the skills that other people had to cope and, with certain stressful situations and to deal with certain stressful situations.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I had one tour I did, where, I didn't leave I'll just, without going into detail, like I didn't leave like a great first impression because it was something dumb that I did, because just for not knowing any better, what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I woke up and it's like, keep in mind, it's like very, like, I want to say it was like the first night of this tour that was really big for me. And I was, I did something just, again, it was just because I didn't know any better. It wasn't out of any kind of malice or anything. And I woke up the next morning and like I called my wife and I'm like walking, it was before load in, and I'm like walking around this city, you know, talking to her, like trying to fight, you know, fight the emotions, you know,
Yeah.
but she thankfully talked me off the ledge. And then I ran into somebody with, you know, one of the band's camps. Are like, dude, it's cool. We get it. You're new, you know, you don't know all the ropes and whatever. But again, for me, it's like my brain races in a million different directions. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, you know, I try to be pretty positive most of the time, but like sometimes when I get into those situations, I stress out so much, and I am absolutely my own worst critic. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking worst case scenario. And then like I need my wife or somebody to talk me off the ledge. I'm like, all right, I'm
Yeah.
good. Now since then, you know, I've learned better coping skills. I've learned, you know, kind of be like, all right, take a step back for a minute, take stock
Yeah.
of the entire situation, and just handle your business.
Yeah. As a fellow neurospicy, I know, you know, what it's
You're a
like.
spicy.
Neurospicy, yeah.
I've never heard that
Um,
one. I like that.
yeah, so it's good that they're very encouraging and like, you know, it's okay. You knew, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm also very glad that you kind of found your wife has helped you through that. That's yeah.
Oh,
That's
she's
great.
so rad, man. Like she's,
Yeah.
you know, I like, you know, not once did she ever give me a hard time, you know, about going out on the road or anything like that. You know, her first question was like, "Hey, are you happy with the pay? All right, great. You know, go do it. Go have fun." You know,
Yeah.
and it's funny because we've been together for, let me think, what, you know, 12-ish years together, been married for 5 years this year, 5 years this year. And we often joke because, you know, when I started touring, like, again, I was thrown into the fire.
Yeah.
So, you know, part of me touring was I worked Hellfest in France, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Great festival.
so a couple of months after I went to France, her company sent her to France also. So we joke that we honeymooned separately in Paris.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Just visions of you going up the Eiffel Tower, like looking at the stars and like.
You know, it was under construction, or like it was under renovation. I am not paying that much to go up the Eiffel Tower. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. When I went up it was alright. It wasn't. I feel it's overrated. I think it looks amazing from a distance, but just
Uh-huh.
yeah. What's the what's the most amazing experience you've had out on the road?
Oh God, there's so many. So I love big cities. So, you know, obviously going to Paris, super awesome. Going to London, was great. When we came in, actually that day that you talked about earlier, the day you got me the Tesco.
Yeah,
I actually have an old friend of mine that grew up with me here in Florida, and he left Florida probably close to 25 years ago. But you know, he was so we were like really good friends in middle school and a little bit into high school. But then we started running with different crowds. He got into a little bit of trouble, but then, you know, he cleaned himself up and he moved over to London, and he has never like looked back. You know,
Oh,
he's
amazing.
got it.
Yeah.
He's got a great career over there. So when we went, when we went over, when I went over with El Nino, I was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna be in town. We got to meet up." So we met up before the show that night. Had a couple of pints. He came
Yeah.
to the show, and it was, you know, it was awesome seeing him. So that's awesome. I mean, like going, you know, like going to cities where you know people is always great. I'm a sucker for a big city, like I was saying. So like I love going to Chicago, New York. My parents actually grew up in New York. So New York is like, it's weird because I'm born and raised in Tampa, but like New York is one of two cities that when I visit, I'm like, I'm home.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
New York is the one, and then my parents actually come from Puerto Rico originally. So going to Puerto Rico is like, oh man, you know, it's great. I'm home. You know,
Yeah.
when I come to Tampa, I'm like, all right, this is where I live, but it's not home. You know, it's weird. I know it's kind of an oxymoron, but like, you know, as far as like best experience on tour. I mean, it's like I've got like some, yeah, I have some wild stories that I'm probably not like willing to share right now.
That's fair.
But it's
That's
like,
fair.
but it's like, it's like, for me, it's just like for me, one of the best parts is just, you know, if, cause you might be on the road for 4 to 6 weeks and, you're going to all these cities, you don't know anybody, but it's like, oh my God, I know somebody in that city. Like
Yeah.
that makes me instantly happy,
Oh, I like that.
so like one of my best friends, lives in Seattle.
Go Seahawks, right?
Right. So, and then, one of my friends, her kid, was living in the Midwest. And, this is somebody that, I watched this kid grow up, you
Yeah.
know? So I was like, hey, when I'm in this city, I'm going to go hit up your kid. And, I was able to bring him out, put him on the guest list to the show. And again, like I've got the wild and crazy stories. But, one that's kind of silly is, the band that I've worked with most, is Dark Funeral. I've done probably about like 60 shows with them,
Oh, wow.
over, and, they're all black metal with the corpse paint and,
Yeah, yeah.
leather armor and, not the greatest affection for organized religion in general.
Yeah.
But they're like the nicest guys ever. I mean, so seeing the guitar, one of the guitar players, Lord Araman, as he calls himself, like we went and visited. Are you familiar with Sweetwater? Like, so it's like the U.S. Tommen, however you say it.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah. So it's a big music retailer that's
Okay, yeah.
online.
Yeah.
And like we got to visit their campus when we were on tour, and they have a slide in the building.
Oh,
So,
my days.
so Mr. Corpse Paint Black Metal Armand, he's great because he doesn't take himself like too seriously.
Yeah.
And I love that
Yeah.
about him. He's like, hey, take a video of me going down the slide. Big
That's fantastic.
6'3" or 4" Swedish guy, like, coming down the slide. And he's like,
Yeah. Oh, that's
So-
amazing.
it's a good time. Always a good time with those guys.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Everyone has this like stereotype, especially about black metal, and it just like the stereotype is just everyone's angry and miserable. People get stereotyped, and then you got this Swedish guy going down a big slide, and
Yeah, and he put that like all over his social media too. So like I can talk about it, of course, because he posted it. But
Yeah.
he's such a good dude. He really is. The whole band is. I can't speak highly enough of them. They probably. So basically, they were the first, like, when I say real tour, it's not to denigrate what I did before them, but they were like
Yeah.
the first one I went out on that was like 6 weeks.
yeah.
And they knew that I was new to doing it. And since we're talking, since you are the heavy metal therapist,
Yeah.
they knew that I was new to doing it. They knew that there was a lot that I had to learn. And dude, especially in the first 2 weeks, I made my fair share of mistakes. Like
Right.
I could go on and on about that. Not once did I get yelled at. Not once did they threaten to send me home. It was just always like a pat on the shoulder. It's okay, man. You'll get it. And now I can do that. And now I can, work for them and do their show with my eyes shut.
So I think that's very important. It's like how people talk to you and how people treat you can either be very encouraging or very detrimental.
That's so true, because I've had other people that I worked for, and I'm not going to mention who it is.
Sure, fair
But
enough.
I've had other people who I worked for. For instance, I did this one tour, and they had a segment in the set where they just kind of the band, like, they kind of take a break in the middle of the song, but like the drums and the bass are still going, and they're introducing the whole the band, and he's like, the guy was like, hey, so during this part, I'm going to look at you and you just toss me these water bottles, and then I'll throw one out to the crowd or whatever. And I'm like, and I told him ahead of time, like, are you sure? Like, I didn't really play sports, and you know,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I can swing a baseball bat and, hit a ball like decently far,
Right.
I can throw a decent spiral on a football, but like you're asking me to kind of underhand pitch you a bottle of water. I don't know, bro. Are you sure? Because I may over underestimate it. Well, that's exactly what happened. So
Oh, dearie me.
I put a little too much zing on it on the underhand throw, and like it hit him in the face,
Oh, man.
and I'm like, and I do one of these. I'm like, oh my god, dude, I'm so sorry. But then, total dick move. Are we allowed to curse? Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're
All right,
good.
all
Yeah.
right. So total dick move, but like he throws it back and intentionally hits me in the face with the bottle of water. And this is
That's
like,
insane.
yeah, this is like a week into the tour, and I'm just like, you know, I'm like, all right, that's strike one, you know.
Yeah.
And then there was another incident which, that happened later on that was so dumb, um that, I mean, I'll just put it this way, there's no need to go into detail on it,
Yeah.
but it was so dumb. And like he's like yelling at me in the middle of in the middle of a show during that same break, right? And I'm like, I'm probably not going to work for this guy again.
Yeah.
And then I didn't, and it's okay. And that's like probably one of the you know that's like one of the great things about being an independent contractor like that, is that you can choose, whom to take work from, and who not to take work from.
Yeah.
But like that's one of those things where, like, the bottle incident and the getting yelled at, like I was actually like super mortified in those
Yeah.
in those instances, and I didn't want to tell my wife, because like I didn't want her to worry about it. So like I didn't end up telling my wife till like probably months later, like we were talking about it, and it was something that was like that really like was weighing heavily on me, because I'm just
Yeah.
like, man, like who does that, or did I do something wrong or whatever? But now at this point I'm like, yeah, like those were both honest mistakes. And I always think back to previous tours, like none of the other guys I worked for yelled at me over dumb stuff. So maybe working for this guy in
Yeah.
the future is not conducive to my mental health.
And I'm guessing that kind of left probably a very sour taste in your mouth. Where like, you never want to work with that band again. And I wonder how many people have been in that
It
situation.
did. Yeah, it definitely did. It definitely did. I was willing to kind of give it. I was willing to give it another shot. Like he and I talked about it, about me working again, but then it never came to fruition. And then he broke up with me on social media. So I'm like, all right, cool.
No.
One less thing for me to worry about. Like, I'm good.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. He broke up with me on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not official, and it's not an official ending of a friendship or any other type of relationship if you're still friends on social media.
Oh yeah. It's,
Yeah.
What's worse is when you go to like say, oh hey, I haven't spoken to you in a while. Oh, add friend. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Other than the bottle incident, what's been your worst experience on tour, and how did you cope with it?
I had a friend, now former friend, because of this incident. So about, let me see, what year are we in? We're in 2025. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So at the end of 23, September of 23 specifically, I had an incident. I got up early one day and was taking my son to work, and it's about 7:00 in the morning, and it's on a Saturday morning. There's not a lot of traffic around. So I drop him off, and I'm like, the whole time I just woken up, like I'm still feeling pretty groggy.
Yeah.
And, he only worked around the corner from the house. Like it was within about 3 miles. So take him to work. And then I'm sitting at the light waiting to come out of the plaza where the restaurant that he was working at is. And like everything just went black. Mind you, I'm behind the wheel of my car. Right? So I passed out, right?
What?
And I go through one of the busiest intersections in my area. I somehow managed not to hit any other cars or property, but I end up in a shallow ditch. And I wake up to my car, airbags deployed, saying, like my car is talking like crash detected. Do you want me to call 911 or something like that? So I'm in, I get out of the car, like I'm vomiting everywhere, and my body's like, like it's like a cold sweat. And I'm going to the hospital. They're like, hey, you need to drink more water. Okay.
What the frick?
So, right. So at the time, I'm touring, and in between touring, like I'm doing odd jobs in between tours, right? So, I'm doing like some minor guitar repair, and then like, I might do Uber here and there, Lyft, whatever. Um, and now my car's totaled. I'm sore from head to toe, just like muscle aches everywhere. And then I get a phone call from a buddy of mine, or at the time a buddy of mine. It's like, hey, I'm out with this pretty big band. I'm not going to say who it was because then we'll know who I'm talking about. So he's like, I'm out with this pretty big band, but I have to go fly and do a show with my even bigger band that I work for normally. Can you cover me on this for like 2 or 3 shows? I'm like, yeah, dude, like I'm sitting here like not making any money. Like I got to do this.
Yeah.
So, I end up going out and doing the shows, and the first show, he is the friend is like I'm shadowing him essentially. And it's a bit of I don't want to call it like a complete train wreck, but I'll say that he has a very way of doing basically everything than I do. Like whether it's setting up the guitars or setting up the gear or whatever else, he just does things differently than me. So, he's like kind of insistent that I do it his way. So I listen for that one night, and then, the next day we go to the next city, and I start, I set up, get everything done. And, I'm like kind of getting the sense that he was on the outs with them, just from different comments from people on the crew. And then, so then we get done with the show. The show goes off like almost perfect. Like it's like a hair away from being flawless. And the production manager comes up to me. He's like, hey, if we need you to finish out the rest of this tour, which was like 2 weeks, could you? Now, mind you, I only packed for like a weekend as far as clothes and stuff, but I'm also not in a position to turn down that kind of money because it was life-changing money. Like, I'm not even kidding a little bit. So, and, I took the gig because, I've got my wife at home and everything else. So, we get to the next city the next day, and they call him and inform him that his services are no longer needed. And then, he texted me like a nasty gram, and I'm like, listen, man, I'm like, you can be mad, but you can also understand that there was no way they were going to bring you back. And, if it wasn't going to be me, it was going to be for somebody else. And, the position I'm in, he knew about the accident, whatever else, he knew that, I didn't have my car anymore. And, it didn't matter to him because his ego was so bruised about it, and I'm not like, it's weird. I always hear that saying, oh, that's business. But because of the type of person I am, like I always like, oh, but what about this and that, but in that instance, I was like, that's just business. There's that. And then like I had one situation, I was out with this band. They had a 12 song set and 10 guitar changes.
What?
And
That's wild.
And then like I would try to ask the guitar player, like, because the guitar player in this band like did everything, Like he designed the lights. He did, he designed the lights. He produced their music. He did everything. But then when I would try to ask him about how certain things were, I'd be like, "Why are you asking me for?" And I'm like really, bro?
Because you do
So
everything? Like,
right, yeah, like because you flew me in with no pre-production and
yeah,
you expect me to know how to do everything, but you didn't like give me any info. And that was one where I was telling my wife, like, man, like I just want to come home. I just want to come home. And I was like, not like that was a rough one for me, to be honest with you. Like that was
yeah,
just I was so stressed out the entire time. And once I finally got home, I'm like, oh, thank you, God, that I'm home.
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, it was.
Um, so, because you said there was a crazy story about El Nino, did you want to talk about that?
Basically, so my background, it's funny because like I turned 47 this year. Um, and I love music. I love playing shows. Um, and I just like the course that my life took in my early 20s made it so that, at least for me, like being away from home wasn't an option. So
Mm.
my son was born when I was 24. Uh, and that it was kind of like, well, I got to be home for the next 18 years at least.
Yeah,
you know
yeah, yeah.
so so my background for work since, for almost the past 20 years has been in, with banking and finance. like
Yeah.
I worked for a major credit card company. I one time had a license to sell life insurance,
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and since about and probably for about the last 9 years, I've been working in the mortgage industry mostly. So I don't know how it is over there, but in the UK, but in the States during the pandemic, the mortgage rates were like stupid low. So you
Mm.
could get into a mortgage for under 3%, right? So
Oh wow. Yeah.
people, right, people were refinancing their houses left, right, and center, right? So we had a ton of work. Um, and then basically, so for, like the Il Nino at the time, their guitar player, Mark Rizzo, I've, I've, I first saw him live, not with El Nino, but with Soulfly back in
Oh
like
yeah.
2005.
Yeah.
And then in 2007, he was doing a solo tour, and I went to the solo tour. Drove 2 hours north of me to go to the solo tour, and that's the first time I actually met him, and he was super cool. And then about 7 years after that, in 2014, he did another solo show here, and we hung out after the show. We actually like that's when we, like, probably when like we started kind of really becoming friends. And then
Yeah.
anytime he'd come into town, like I'd go to the show, we'd hang out. So during the pandemic, when I was getting all of that work
Yeah.
and musicians weren't really able to tour, right? I said to Mark, I was like, "Hey, book some Florida shows. Don't ask me to do it because I don't know the first thing about, and still don't know the first thing about booking a show.
Yeah.
Bring your guitar. Don't bring your guitar, whatever. But you can use my gear. And then I'll take some vacation time from work and I'll take you around. So he booked like 2 or 3 Florida shows. I took like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days off of work. And took him around, and he was nice enough to invite me to come up and jam with him. It was cool. So
Yeah.
then you fast forward to the end of the pandemic. We're in 2022 now, and the world's starting to open back up. And the Federal Reserve Bank here in America, they are the ones who control all the interest rates
Yeah.
for mortgages, bonds, things like that. They said, all right, we're going to raise rates because now that the world is starting to open back up, we got to slow this down. We don't want, the economy to go too crazy and there'll be too much inflation, et cetera, et cetera. So my company had a round of layoffs. And I was like, I told my wife, I was like, listen, if they raise rates again, it's very likely that I'm going to get laid off. I said, so just to prepare you.
Yeah.
Well, a month later, that's exactly what happened. They had a round of layoffs, and like the Fed raised rates. I didn't hear anything, and then like one day, I don't know, it was like, I don't know, it might have been a Monday. Like all of a sudden, like I get an invitation to a Zoom meeting, and I didn't see it at first. And then I get I get an instant message from somebody on my team. They're like, "Hey, you need to join this meeting." I'm like, "Oh God, here we go." So I get on the meeting, and that's exactly what it was. They're like, "All right, here you go. Thank you for your service. We're going to give you a severance. All right, see you later, bye." Thanks. So I wasn't like necessarily worried. I have a dear friend of mine here in town that is a lawyer. And he is he's got he's a total definition of a gentle giant, because he's well over 6 feet tall. He's a big guy, but he's just got this like level of empathy that you don't often see in people. He has done so much for me over the years. So he was one of the first people that I texted. I'm like, "Hey man, I just lost my job. Can you help me?" So he got me set up with a Zoom interview with a law firm to be a paralegal, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I did the interview, and he's like, "Oh, dude, you crushed the interview. They're going to make you an offer." And that same day that I had that interview, Mark Rizzo hits me up, and he says, "Hey, I need a tech for tour. Are you in?" And I'm like, "Man, I just interviewed at this law firm, bro. Like, I want to do it, but let me get back to you." He's like, "All right, but let me know soon, bro." Yeah. So I thought about it for about 30 minutes, and then I texted him like, "Nah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go on tour with you."
That's amazing.
And the job offer from the law firm never came, and I'm so glad.
Oh, wow. So
I'm so glad that I went on tour. Because I got to, I'd never, like, I had a passport, but by the time that I did that first Europe run where I met you, my passport had been expired for like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I never even used it before that, you know what I mean? But that was my first time going to Europe. And I got to meet so many people that like I still have on, my social media till this day that I met in Europe. Like there's one dude in Bulgaria, for instance, because we did do a show in Bulgaria, and like I see him post from time to time, like, all right, cool, he's still stage managing, awesome. Like that guy, that guy rules, But yeah, so it was like everything lined up perfect. And then of course, going back to what I was saying earlier, like my wife was like, "Go do it, man. Go live your dream." Like and you know what, the exact phrase she used was, "One of us deserves to be happy with what we're doing." And I'm like, oh man, like that punched me like right in the feels,
Yeah.
Because that's just, she's so, I'm so fortunate that she hasn't given me a hard time. Like she's, you see it on tour all the time, man. You see people who are like arguing with their wives or their girlfriends or significant others back home, but I never had those moments. I'm so lucky.
That. Yeah.
The whole topic here is mental health on tour, really. And I have to say that I've not like really had like any situations that like I mean, I've had times where I've been stressed out or whatever, but like worrying about what my wife is doing, or it's like, or worrying if she's gonna be mad about something, like have definitely not been like any of those scenarios. I've been very fortunate.
I love that, and I think it's interesting because a lot of I mean, we're 4 interviews in now into this podcast, and every single one, it seems like everyone is actually doing, like, there obviously been some, so like the guys in El Nino, they've been doing it for years, and like, so they've got a few more things where, mental health plays in because they're out on the road for so long. But also, I think like the general gist of what I'm getting from people is that music is, it feels like music is so cathartic that it's almost helpful and drives people's mental health in the right direction. And I think like what the guys in El Nino and also a couple of the other guys that I spoke to, the issue comes from when they come off tour. And I don't think that's the case with you. I think because you sounds like you got a really fantastic life. But it's like they kind of don't know what to do with themselves when they come off tour. But I think in general, it sounds like music is almost like, yeah, it drives good mental health, I think.
Well, so I mean, I know that there are definitely guys out there that, you know, to your point, you know, they don't know what to do when they come off tour. I have, you know, I don't think I've ever had that problem because like the thing is when I get home, especially if it's like if I'm gone for a month or whatever, I need like the only thing that I need is I need about like 2 days for my body to catch up on sleep.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and then that's it, and then I'm back to waking up at 5:36 in the morning, and then I'm good. So I've been pretty fortunate in that regard. Um, but yeah, I mean, music in general got me through some of the roughest times of my life when I was a teenager and into my 20s. You know, my wife and I are both on our second marriages here. And you know, funny, like nerding out to a rock star story that I'll give you. When we did Bloodstock in 22, Machine Head was on it, and they are one
yeah,
of my all time favorite bands. And you know, you know, I've met the various lineups of the band over the years many times just from going to shows.
yeah,
But like I'll always nerd out, and it sucks because like I want to treat them like normal people and not like a total fanboy. But you know, it happens. And
yeah.
at that Bloodstock, I actually, you know, was able to meet and become friends with their original drummer, Chris Contos. Super awesome guy, like one of the sweetest guys ever. But you know, Rob Flynn was there when we were loading in for El Nino, and I was like, "Oh man, Rob, you know, it's so good to meet you." You know, and I've always, you know, again, I've probably met him about half a dozen times before that at different shows.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Darkness Within got me through my divorce," and he's like,
Oh.
"Okay, dude." Like
Oh,
he
that's
didn't, you know,
funny.
he didn't. You know, he didn't do the thumbs up. He's like, yeah, okay, you know.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And
Yeah.
yeah, like because you know, and I'd imagine like, and again, it was you know, like as soon as I said it, it was like, you know, face palm moment, you know, like
Yeah.
damn it. But I would imagine because you know the guy is a very prolific songwriter. Like he's
Yeah.
you know, he's been
Yeah.
doing it for 30 years. So I'd imagine that with a lot of people, because I am not a prolific songwriter. I've maybe written, you know, half a dozen songs ever.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that when you get to a certain level and, you know, with certain types of people, you know, you might hear something like that. And like, it might be one of those things where you're still not used to it. Like, you know, what? You know, they hear
Yeah.
it and they're like, how? Like, it's, you know, just a song or whatever. I don't know. That's just my theory.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because it's like, you know, music, you know, different songs, different genres speak to people differently, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, on the flip side of that, it's like I had a situation, you know, a few years ago where I was building this band from the ground up, right? I had, you know, I had another guy playing guitar. We had our vocalist, pick out this bass player, and then we had this drummer that was, I didn't know we started playing with him, but like he had cancer, and
Oh
he brought
no.
it up one day at one of the rehearsals. You know, he brought it up one day, and he's like, "Yeah, he's like, this is probably the last band I'm gonna be in. You know, I don't know if you guys know, but I have cancer. I've been doing, you know, immunotherapy, whatever." And we all thought he was going to get better, and he didn't,
Oh.
unfortunately, and he passed away. And after that, like, I didn't touch a guitar for 3 months,
Wow.
like it's just hanging on the wall. And I didn't want to play. Like I just, I didn't want to listen to music. I didn't want to play music. I didn't want to do anything. I was so distraught because like I was like really psyched about what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then it all fell apart. And about 3 months after that, the lawyer that I told you about earlier, buddy of mine, he texted me. He's like, because he was actually the vocalist of the band. He's like, "Hey, are we gonna finish these songs or what?" And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Let me see. So I definitely am not what you would call like a producer. Like I know my way a little bit around an audio workstation. But in that moment, like I started watching, because we always took videos of our rehearsals. So I started looking at the videos, and we hadn't put any, recorded anything. And I'm like, there's something here.
Yeah.
So through that situation, through Josh, the lawyer, giving me the proverbial kick in the ass,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. So I taught myself how to program MIDI drums beat by beat in Logic.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not saying that they sound real, but I'm saying that they, are a reasonable facsimile of what was being played on the recording,
I love that.
the video. So, so I taught myself, and, I programmed all the drums, and then I started putting the guitars down, and I put the bass down. Like we've never finished these recordings. And I just have these, these demos sitting on my hard drive here. But to actually do that and kind of, it was very therapeutic for me, because I got to like listen to it, and it got me kind of, after a 3-month hiatus of not touching any instruments, just like literally vegging out on my couch when I wasn't out, working or something, and watching a movie or playing PlayStation. Like it got me to, kind of get back into it, which is pretty cool.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you plan on finishing them?
I would like to do, because there's one song specifically that he had the biggest hand in writing.
Yeah.
And I would like to really just do that one, because there's a couple of songs that were like he might have helped here and there, and then there was a couple that I wrote, just kind of as a supplement, I guess, because we had only had like 3 or 4 original songs.
Yeah.
But I think like that first one that we did together, like kind of just fully encapsulates what he was going for.
Yeah.
Because he was very specific, like, I want to do something that's more like hardcore punk, and he just, that's the one. So I think just that one, if we do put it out, if we do finish one, that's going to be the one.
I love that. You should absolutely do it, Mark. I really want to hear that. Yeah.
I mean, I'll send you the crappy demo, I'll let you hear that.
I appreciate
totally
it.
fine.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 3-chord hardcore. That's all it is.
That, dude, sometimes that's the best type of hardcore, is when it's 3 chords.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. In wrapping this up, is there anything you'd like to share with people that may be considering, taking up being a musician full-time, or being a tech full-time, or just anything you'd want to encourage people to do or not do?
I would say it's very, I'm thankful that I don't have an, like, it's weird. I wouldn't say that I have an addictive personality. Like I go through these phases where, like, because like I'm not straight edge, but like I don't do any drugs. I don't smoke weed.
Yeah.
But I love me a nice high alcohol by volume craft beer. I love me a nice bourbon. I love me a nice scotch. So I go through these phases where I'll like for maybe 2 weeks straight or something. I'll have a drink every night or whatever, and then I won't touch it. When you're on the road, it's so much easier to fall into those traps. It's so much easier to fall in the traps of, oh, hey, we're done with the show, everybody's going to the bar,
Yeah.
And And of course, for certain bands, none of the ones I've worked with, but for certain bands, the drug use is there. And it's easy to fall into those traps because you're away from home, you're away from your loved ones, away from whatever else. So the biggest thing I would say is before you can, really, worry about, making a career, you have to stay healthy. And, mental health is a completely different animal, but like for the physical health, you want to make sure that you don't fall into the traps of, drinking after every show.
Yeah.
And I certainly did have nights like that where I'd go out and have a couple of beers, but, and there was I used to kind of have this rule, quote unquote, I get one per tour where I get to get nice and nice and silly with,
Yeah.
But, but in all seriousness, you don't want to fall into those traps. You don't want to fall into the substance abuse traps. You don't want to fall into the drug traps or anything like that. You want to stay healthy. You want to stay at your best because, especially coming as a crew person, the crew, like, yes, the audience is there to see the band.
Yeah.
But the crew is who makes that show happen.
Yeah.
And if you're not on top of your game, if you're getting drunk or getting high before the show, or even after a show, and then you wake up with a hangover the next day or whatever, you're not performing at 100%. Like, it's not happening. It's not happening. And I can attest to that firsthand. I had one show specifically where everybody went out after it was the second to last show of the tour. Everybody went out. Most of the crew got hammered after the show. And then we had the last show the next day. And yeah, I wasn't performing at 100%. It was bad. And at that point I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm getting too old. Like this is the last time. So stay healthy. But the other thing too is, as far as the mental health aspect, I don't envy tour managers at all.
Right.
Because the tour manager has the hardest job on the tour. Because oftentimes with a tour manager, they're not only doing that, they're also, like, you'll have their tour manager and they do front of house, or their tour manager and they're doing merch, right? But on top of that, as the tour manager, you're essentially, and this is not to denigrate anybody I've been on tour with, but as the tour manager, essentially, you're a babysitter too, because you have to make sure that everybody's in their best behavior. There is no HR department on the road, so you're kind of that, but always, if you're having a tough time with anything, get with your tour manager, or somebody close that you trust on the crew, and see what they can do to help you out. And if they're not willing to help you, if they're not willing to do something to help you out, with wherever your situation, even if it's just a pep talk, even if it's just a pep talk, if they're not willing to do something to help you out, you're on the wrong tour, bro. Like, that's it. Like, you gotta, maybe they need to find somebody else, and because everybody has their different limits, their thresholds. So just, don't be afraid to talk to somebody. And, mental health on the road is like, everybody's, you'll hear people who are jaded and have been touring for years and years and years. Oh, well, the whole crew is missing this event with their family, or the whole crew is missing birthdays and holidays and this, that, and the other. Yeah, that's all well and good. We know, but that doesn't make this person's stress or their care any less valid, because everybody else is experiencing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's, at the end of the day, just don't be a dick. Like, that's it.
Don't be a dick. I love that. Yeah. Dude, Mark, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this.
I thank you so much for even thinking of me. You know what I mean? There's plenty of other people that have been doing this a lot longer than me and have way more experience that are way better at this than I am. So for you to even think of me, man, it's an honor. Thank you so much. And I talked earlier about people that I met at different parts of the world that I still remember that stuck out. Like absolutely you, John, of course, you too.
Oh, dude, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.